Welcome back to Whispers of Wisdom. Drop your city name in the comments if you liked the video. Let's start the story. Daniel Reed pulled into the driveway of his new suburban home, a modest two-story house with a wide porch and a neatly trimmed lawn. To most, it looked like the perfect place for peace and quiet, exactly what he wanted after years of dealing with the chaos of city life. He carried the last moving box inside, unaware that curious eyes were already watching him from across the street. At the end of the block, Mr. Collins, the HOA president, stood with his clipboard, whispering to another board member. "New guy. Doesn't look like he follows rules?" Collins muttered, narrowing his eyes at Daniel's truck parked slightly over the edge of his driveway. To Collins, even the smallest detail was a violation. Daniel, however, wasn't concerned. He was used to being watched, scrutinized even, but he had learned long ago never to be intimidated. For now, he simply wanted to settle in, maybe meet a few friendly neighbors, and enjoy his new home. That evening, as he sat on the porch drinking coffee, Mrs. Thompson, an elderly neighbor, waved warmly from across the street. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she called out. Daniel smiled and waved back, grateful for at least one kind gesture. But just as he relaxed, he noticed Mr. Collins approaching with his clipboard. "Mr. Reed, isn't it? Just so you know, this community has standards. That truck of yours, already a violation." Daniel raised an eyebrow, but stayed calm. "Thanks for the reminder. I'll keep that in mind," he said evenly. Collins smirked, scribbling something down. "We'll be watching." Daniel leaned back in his chair, suppressing a grin. If only they knew who they were watching. The next morning, Daniel opened his mailbox to find a neatly folded letter stamped with the HOA seal. Inside was a typed notice, accusing him of multiple violations, improper parking, leaving a recycling bin visible, and even failing to mow his lawn, despite having moved in just yesterday. Daniel chuckled as he read through the list. Efficient, I'll give them that, he thought, tossing the paper onto the counter. He had seen worse forms of intimidation in his career, but this level of pettiness was almost amusing. Later that afternoon, while Daniel unpacked boxes in the garage, Mrs. Thompson stopped by again. "Don't let them get to you," she whispered, glancing nervously toward the HOA office down the street. "Collins thinks he owns this neighborhood. He runs the board like a dictator. Thanks for the warning," Daniel replied, his tone calm but firm. "I've dealt with men like him before." That evening, Collins returned, this time with two other board members. They stood on Daniel's porch as though conducting an inspection. Collins tapped his clipboard and announced, "Mr. Reed, your mailbox is half an inch too tall. That's a violation. And your curtains don't match the community guidelines." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Curtains? Really?" Collins smirked. "Rules are rules. Keep ignoring them, and you'll face consequences." Daniel didn't respond right away. He simply studied Collins, his expression unreadable. Inside, however, he was piecing together just how far this man was willing to go to protect his fragile sense of power. After the HOA members left, Daniel sat quietly on his porch again. The night was still, the stars faint above the suburban glow. He sipped his coffee and muttered under his breath, "If they want to fight, they'll get one, but not the kind they expect." By the end of the week, Daniel had received 3 more violation letters, each one more absurd than the last. Complaints about the angle of his porch light, the shade of his front door, even the way he placed his welcome mat. It was clear now, the HOA wasn't just enforcing rules. They were waging a personal war. That Friday evening, just as Daniel was about to sit down for dinner, a sharp knock rattled his front door. He opened it to find 2 men in crisp uniforms standing stiffly on the porch. Their badges gleamed under the porch light, and their voices carried the weight of authority, at least on the surface. "Mr. Reed?" one asked firmly. "We've received multiple reports of you violating community laws. We're here to take you in for questioning." Daniel leaned against the doorframe, studying them. Their uniforms looked authentic enough at first glance, but there were subtle details off, the badges too shiny, the belts lacking the standard gear, and their posture awkward, not trained. Imposters, Daniel thought instantly. Still, he played along. "Is that so?" he said calmly, his lips curving into the faintest smirk. "And where exactly are you planning to take me?" The taller one straightened. "Downtown precinct. Now come with us, or we'll escalate." Daniel nodded slowly, as though considering. "All right then," he said, stepping out onto the porch. "Lead the way." The men exchanged quick glances, clearly surprised by how easily he complied. They expected resistance, fear, maybe even anger. Instead, Daniel's calm demeanor unsettled them. As they walked him toward the curb, Daniel's eyes flicked down the street. He noticed a few neighbors peeking from behind curtains, whispers spreading. He allowed himself a small, knowing smile. The game is about to end, and I'm holding all the cards. The two imposters guided Daniel toward an unmarked black sedan parked by the curb. Their act was convincing enough for the casual eye, but Daniel walked calmly, his hands loose at his sides, as if he were humoring them. "Hands behind your back," the taller one ordered, pulling out a pair of handcuffs that looked slightly too new, too polished. He snapped them open with a clumsy flick. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "You're awfully eager," he remarked. His tone wasn't fearful, it was amused. Before the cuffs could click shut, the distant wail of sirens pierced the quiet street. Red and blue lights flooded the neighborhood as 3 official patrol cars screeched to a halt. Real officers poured out, weapons drawn, surrounding the scene with practiced precision. The imposters froze. Panic flashed across their faces. "We were just—" the shorter one stammered, but his words died as the commanding officer stepped forward. "Stand down!" barked Sergeant Miller, a stern figure with years of authority in his voice. He looked directly at Daniel. "Chief, are you all right?" Gasps erupted from the gathering neighbors. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Chief? Did he say chief?" Daniel straightened, his calm smirk widening. "I'm fine, Sergeant. Though I can't say the same for these gentlemen." He gestured toward the fake officers, who were trembling under the sudden spotlight. Collins, watching from his porch with smug satisfaction, turned pale. His expression collapsed as realization struck. He had tried to outmaneuver the very man who ran the city's police force. Sergeant Miller's men swiftly disarmed and restrained the imposters. "You're under arrest for impersonating law enforcement," one officer announced, cuffing them with the real tools of justice. Daniel folded his arms, his voice steady. "And now, it's time we have a conversation with the HOA." The crowd of neighbors grew quickly, drawn by the flashing lights and raised voices. Some whispered in shock, others simply stared at Daniel with new eyes. A man they had assumed was just another homeowner had just been addressed as chief. Mr. Collins stormed down the walkway, his face flushed with panic. "This is a misunderstanding," he shouted. "Those men, those officers, were simply here to enforce community regulations." Sergeant Miller stepped forward, his glare sharp. "Community regulations don't authorize impersonating sworn officers. Do you realize the severity of this crime?" Collins faltered, his voice cracking. "I didn't know they weren't real officers. I was told—" He stopped himself, realizing he was digging his own grave. Daniel's calm voice cut through the noise. "Save it, Collins. I've read every notice you sent me. Every baseless violation. You escalated harassment into criminal territory when you sent imposters to my door." The neighbors murmured louder now. Some looked angry, others relieved that Collins's bullying was finally being challenged. Mrs. Thompson stepped forward, her frail voice surprisingly firm. We've all suffered under this man's rules for years. About time someone stood up to him. The fake officers, now handcuffed in the back of a squad car, avoided eye contact. Their bravado had evaporated, leaving only shame. Collins tried again, desperation dripping from his tone. "Chief Reed, please, we can work this out quietly. No need to ruin reputations." Daniel's expression hardened. "Reputations are earned, Collins. And yours has been built on fear. Tonight that ends." Sergeant Miller signaled to his men. "Bring him in." 2 officers moved toward Collins. He stumbled back, sputtering protests, but it was useless. The neighborhood that once bowed to his authority now watched in silence as he faced his downfall. The following morning, the neighborhood buzzed with a new kind of energy. Where there had once been fear of Collins and his HOA board, now there was relief, hope, even. Word spread quickly that the HOA president had been taken into custody, and that charges were pending not only for harassment, but also for conspiracy. Daniel stepped out onto his porch with a cup of coffee, the same calm smile on his face. For the first time since moving in, the air felt lighter. Mrs. Thompson approached with a basket of muffins. "Chief Reed," she said warmly, "I think I speak for everyone when I say thank you. None of us had the courage to stand up to him. But you did." Daniel chuckled. "Please call me Daniel. I didn't move here to be the chief. I just wanted a quiet place to live. But when someone abuses power—" He paused, his eyes drifting toward the HOA office down the street. "It's my duty to act." A small crowd gathered around his yard, neighbors shaking his hand, introducing themselves properly for the first time. Without Collins' shadow looming, they felt free. Later that week, an emergency community meeting was called. With Collins absent, the remaining board members resigned under pressure. A new committee was formed, one focused on fairness rather than control. To everyone's surprise, Daniel declined an invitation to lead it. "I'm here to be your neighbor," he told them, "not your ruler. But if you ever need me, you know where I am." The room erupted in applause. As Daniel walked home that evening, he looked around the street lined with glowing porch lights and smiling faces. For once, the neighborhood truly felt like a community. And Daniel Reed finally had the peace he was looking for.